First up is László Kishonti, who is a serial entrepreneur and started off in doing high-performance graphics and computing, and now he's actually focusing on automotive solutions for doing artificial intelligence and autonomous driving. So,
thank you. My name is László Kishonti, and thank you for the opportunity. I will talk about how you can enhance and accelerate the safety and development speed or process of self-driving cars, self-driving car software with simulation. You know that Google has driven 6 million miles in real roads, which is the top according to the statistics compared to other self-driving car companies. But the truth is that in the US, 100 million miles are driven on average to result a single deadly accident. So we are sure that even after 6 million miles, we are not sure if these self-driving cars are safe or not safe. And if we just see what industry experts say, they say that at least 8 billion miles should be driven on self-driving cars to make sure that they are really safe, which means that would cost at least $20 billion. Not every company, maybe none of the companies have the resources to drive 8 billion miles and spending $20 billion just to show to the customers and the public audience that the cars are safe. So if you want to make safe self-driving cars, one of the things you can do is to check around in other industries. And we all know that aviation industry is about 100,000 times safer than road traffic based on average accident per mile. And what they do is they use extensively simulation environments both for pilot training and both for aircraft testing during the development process. And my presentation is about how we could copy this approach into self-driving car development and what are the lessons we have learned and what are the things we can improve. So we use the simulation environment not just for testing the final car, the final software, but we also embed it very deeply into the development process, which is, I think, will be the standard in a few years. I can expect that even the governments will require some kind of proof that the company who developed this certain car or components can show that the testing involved many situations which cannot be really safely or easily tested in real-world situations. Just one note again, so why simulation is better or can compound real-world testing. It is safer, obviously, it is cheaper, we have discussed that. It is repeatable. This is one of the most important priorities. So if something happens, then you can repeat the test again 1 million times, and it saves time. So for example, in sunny California, you can test rainy weather on a 101 highway, or in summer, you can test winter weather. So this is the development pipeline we support or suggest to follow. Basically, what you can see is that the feature requests from clients or internal to the company come inside, and what you can do with these feature requests, like lane change, for example, you can generate safety and rule-based requirements, which you can instantly generate into simulation test scenarios. And in companies where simulation is already used in the development process, they can enforce that nothing can be tested in real world which hasn't been successfully tested in the simulation. So for example, if something doesn't work in the simulator, no engineer can persuade me to test on the real world, because in the simulation environment, of course, it's somewhat easier to test and, of course, much, much safer. So even if it's not working in the simulator, then you should go back and tune the software or improve the quality of the software. And only when the results are good in the simulator, then you can go to the real world testing, closed or open road, public road testing. After this process, you will still have a lot of data from real-world testing. So I don't say real-world testing is not important. What I'm trying to say is that after you finish the simulation testing, you are probably at about around 90% of the functionality. The rest of the 10% of the functionalities are still should be tested in the real world, because scenarios which you couldn't expect can be tested accidentally in the real world testing, of course, with safe and trained test pilots. And when the test pilot reports an issue, and the best way to report it is with automated disengagement reports. Disengagement report is when the test pilot needs to involve in the control of the car. So basically it takes back the steering wheel or brakes, or obviously doesn't let the car into getting into a serious trouble. So the trained test pilot stops the car in autonomous mode and takes over the control. These disengagement reports are again very analogous to the aviation industry black box data. So with the disengagement reports, you can generate even more simulated scenarios in the simulator, so you can make sure that nothing happens, no issue happens ever again, because you will add these tests into your daily practice, and you will make sure that all the engineers and development team will know the different testing. One more thing I haven't said that, but if you would not know for the first time what to test and what not to test, the Federal Traffic Safety Agency has public data sets of millions of vehicle accidents. By the way, 39 type of accidents are classified at the moment. Most of them, 98% of the accidents caused by these 39 basic accident types. Of course, you can also use the standard traffic rule books, but these accident data sets are public for everyone, so it's not something you need to buy. What you can simulate in a simulator, basically everything. You can simulate the sensors, you can simulate the environmental issues, weather, lighting conditions, and you can even simulate sensors, individual sensors and sensor setups. Even you can simulate sensors which are not yet available on the market. Obviously, we all know that the automotive product cycle is very long. Many times you are developing cars which come maybe 3 or 5 years later than from today. And some of the sensors are only in prototypes. You know the parameters to test, but you don't have access to the real-world sensors. And with this sensor setup simulation, very interesting experiments are possible. For example, you can see what you need to really fuse to make sure that your final decisions are safe. In the development process, what we suggest is that each engineer should have access to the simulator, because then you can provide individual feedback to the engineers and developers. Basically, they can individually run. Actually, it's not just they can, but they should have reports based on any code change happened in the code, which triggers a lot of pre-commit tests. So each engineer will know if he made better or worse certain functionalities in the software stack. This is a question everyone asks from me when you use a simulator. Should you use it for neural network training? What we found is that the simulated tests for the perception or the simulated environment for the perceptions are still very important because what you can do is to accelerate the virtual data collection, and you can create new algorithms based on these virtual data sets and test them. Because data annotation is quite expensive process. If you can generate different kind of data sets for new kind of algorithms, you can pre-test them, you can check the validity of the new algorithms. But I strongly warn most of the users not to use the simulated data set trained networks in real world, because they usually don't fit perfectly well on the perception side. So what we think is that after the algorithm has proven itself in the virtual data set, in the virtual world, you should extend the training data with real world data for the perception. For the control and trajectory planning, though, I think that the virtual data set is already good for training. For example, many companies use reinforcement learning for high traffic situations. This is a good setup, but there are caveats also there, because you need to make sure that the car physical properties are similar to the final car, the real car's physical properties. How you can run these simulations. One thing is to run them real time, like hardware in the loop tests, where you can test the real world hardware in a simulated environment. So the real world hardware, the processing engine will think that it is running in a real situation. That's more for stability and performance testing. This is the closest to the real world situation. You can also test the latencies of different pipelines in the software stack or the sensor setup. But we found that in many cases this real-world testing, either because of the limitation of the number of hardware available or the limitation of the performance of the hardware, is limited to a few pieces of real systems, or the systems required to do this real-time testing are very expensive or large, heavy, and only available in server environments. So we will also introduced a fixed time testing mode, which is basically runs on any kind of heterogeneous environments, even on CPUs. So for example, an engineer can run these fixed time tests on his own notebook and be able to test the individual results and can debug the system. Obviously, this is slower, but because it provides always the same result, it's deterministic, you can get the same data out every time you run it, and you can share this with your colleagues. In our development pipeline, I already told you that we have pre-commit tests, basically daily intraday tests where the individual developers are required or just optionally testing their own code. And we have a huge bench of nightly tests which run every night, thousands of scenarios. And actually, we also have a weekend testing where all the test scenarios are run. It is based on the company's development goals. I think that you should never forget even the oldest scenarios to run regularly, because many times I've seen that engineers focusing on the newer problems with the best intentions, they forget to support basic functionality. So I think that building a large data set of test scenarios and running them regularly, at least weekly or monthly, is a safe approach, especially later when you need to prove to the authorities or the consumers or business partners that you have a safety net for all the things you test in the simulator. Modular testing. This is one of the most important strategic advantage of simulator. What you can do is to replace some of your modules inside the self-driving software stack with ground truth data. This means that in the process pipeline, so for example, if you first run the perception and then do the model space and then the trajectory and the control, in these steps, what you can do is to switch all of these modules into ground truth mode, basically using the perfect data and running only a single module in in real-time calculated versions. And this way, you can separate the issues generated by a certain team, and you can provide individual team responsibilities. So I've seen many times that if at the end of the pipeline an issue happened, then development teams simply debate who caused the problem. With the modular testing approach, you can decrease these debates and have the individual teams to be able to test their own code without being to point out other teams' problems. It is also possible to cross-test different new versions of the software stack. You can use the old versions of the simulator, the scenarios, and the self-driving software to test the newer versions of each of these components. I draw the matrix here, you understand. So basically, if you can make sure that with the old version of the simulator and the self-driving software, all the new versions of the simulators scenarios work, then basically you are safer when you need to change versions of each component. Okay, what's the problems with simulator? Car physics is a very sophisticated science. You know that most of the car physics engines sometimes run not real time, because the car physics simulations are very complex software packages. So if you want to run real-time simulation, you need to make sure that your car drives in the simulator very similarly to the real-world car. It requires measurement and vehicle evaluation in both the simulated software. This will never finish. What you will see, especially at high speeds, that you need to make sure that the simulated car works similarly. Timing is another issue in real world. There are a lot of latencies from Ethernet cameras to GPS delays and latencies, and these ones also needs to be precisely measured in the real world to make sure that your simulated software provides the same issues, because then you will have a problem if you, for example, would expect that everything is smooth and zero latency in the software, and then in the car you will find that many times just from the control triggers the steering wheel change, it might take 100 to 200 milliseconds to have the wheels change, turn. Another issue is many companies are using game engines for simulations. I don't think game engine is a good experiment. This is what we used earlier, but if you check most of the game engines, you will see that the physics is not real. Usually they limit you only to use a single GPU, which will limit the number of sensors you can simulate, and also the environment is not so sophisticated. So for example, it's not easy to set up different kind of environments, both traffic environments and weather or lighting environments. Okay, so I think you understand that you can get a lot of data and results from these, and what's very important is it generates so much data that you need somehow automate the data processing, because if you have 100,000 tests a day, somehow need to automate the evaluation of the data. And initially, it is just success and fail, but then you can calculate different statistical methods to see what's the stability of the software, which tests were successful but still somewhat unstable. And basically, this is the most important part, and this will cost most of the time to be able to automate all these evaluation logic in your system, especially if you have thousands or hundreds of thousands of scenarios. So, summary, one sentence, I think simulation is a proven environment in the aviation industry. One of the reasons why aviation is so much safer, because they can test a lot of things in simulation, and I strongly encourage all self-driving car software developers to use some kind of simulated environments to enhance the safety, decrease the cost, and accelerate the development time. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, László. Any questions? Microphone right here. Microphone, please. These sessions are being recorded, so.
So have you tried to use the simulation data with the drivers that are monitoring the system in real time as a training aid to help train the pilots, the co-pilots, on what they should do in the case of an emergency? Have you considered using the simulation data for that? Based on what happened in Arizona, I wonder if more training for the operators might be needed.
Yes, I think the most important conclusion of that Uber accident was that it's not, there was a software bug inside, but the most important problem was that they used only one driver in the car, and that driver was not properly trained. We have specific trainings on real racetracks for our trainers, but actually we also use a simulator, but it's not the self-driving car simulator. It's a more professional simulator box with some physics involved.
Further questions? Step up to the microphone, please.
So in your simulations, do you, how much of the real sensor data do you input into the simulators? Like you have lots of different sensors, and so how do you try to simulate all the different sensor data that comes in?
Yes. So with the simulation, basically camera data is the most. So that has the highest bandwidth. So from performance point of view, that's where we invest most of the time, because with 12 cameras you need a pretty powerful computer. With the LiDAR simulation, I think that's a little bit easier. From the real physical point of view, what we found, radar simulation is one of the hardest problem. What we did, we simplified. Using commercial radars available, most of these commercial radars have a high-level object detection mode, and at the moment, this is a limitation on our side, we simulate the high-level output of the radar, not the lowest level frequency bands or interactions.
Hi, so I was wondering, in real-time simulation, so in any simulation, we represent the system using some mathematical equations, basically differential equations. And you run in simulation, you just keep on executing the equation. So for the real-time simulation, how do you consider that event has occurred? Do you consider a very minimum time step and then make sure that you are not losing the event? What is the approach for the real-time simulation?
Sorry, so what?
So my question is, in any simulation, how do we simulate a system? We keep on executing that system for a particular time period. When we say that it's a real-time system, that means you are executing the events at the same time when the event occurred, right? So I was wondering, how do you capture that exact event time?
I think this might be a misunderstanding. So, meaning real time, I didn't mean that it's a real-time system in the sense of having everything exactly timed. I don't think it is possible. For example, for the drive-by-wire box is a real-time in that sense. Well, I just try to mean that the real-time system runs with the same speed like the real setup. For example, if you have a large box with multiple sensors, I don't think at the moment it is possible to have microsecond precision, even in the real car.
Right. That's what my question
Yeah.
was actually. How are you achieving that?
I don't think it is possible in the whole system. For the drive-by-wire box, basically, which controls the car, that's a real-time system. But the large processing computer, I think most of the self-driving car companies use standard PCs for prototyping, and those are not real-time in that sense.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can you give us some like scenarios like what a simulator can do and what a simulator cannot do?
Actually, I had a video, just I didn't show you because I was running out of time.
2 minutes if it's short. You have 2 minutes. If it's
Yeah. I just
Go for it.
this is so this is just a screen how we yeah, sorry. Again.
Oh.
We already.
Might be able to. Okay, so it's showing there. You might be able to sort of slide. Is it on a separate display?
We already.
Yeah, it's not showing.
Not
Sorry.
showing. Sorry. So on this small screen, unfortunately, it's a very low resolution one. But what you can see here is that we have a lot of debug information. This is, I think, it is a lane change scenario at the moment in this video, but I cannot show it at the moment. So you have all the outputs of the engine, stability metrics, performance metrics, measurements, and basically, I think everything can be simulated at the moment which you have ever thought about. So any kind of weather, city, traffic conditions. So we haven't found any major problem with simulating new scenarios.
Excellent. Any more? All right, László, thank you very much. That was very good.